Let's move on to economic matters because we're getting close to the budget and there's a lot changing in the economic outlook as we speak. I want to catch up with the Judo Bank Chief Economic Advisor, Warren Hogan. Good to talk to you, Warren. I've been fascinated by your commentary of late because we only have to go back a couple of weeks and, you know, as Paul Keating would say, every cockatoo and every pet shop in the country was talking about interest rate cuts. Now you've started to say the next move might be upwards. And in fact, I just saw half an hour ago with Ross Greenwood, Gareth Aird from the CBA now agrees and says the near-term risk is a rate rise.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Chris. Yeah, look, the story has shifted in the last 6 weeks and really become apparent, and I think those inflation numbers last week spooked a few people. But the narrative that was forming earlier in the year, and the government really got onto it, was that, you know, this pivot from just fighting inflation to supporting growth, that sort of was a bit premature because the economy is looking a little better than it was this year. It was certainly soft last year, all driven by household, you know, consumer belt tightening. But we're starting to see some signs of life. Business activity's improved, employment's remaining pretty solid. And if this continues, then in the presence of this sticky inflation, the RBA may be forced back into tightening. And of course, that's something that's sort of really hit the markets and of course, you really changed the narrative out there.
Now, one of the factors in breaking down these numbers is that discretionary spending is very, very tight, that there's next to no inflation in non-discretionary spending, the stuff we have to spend, the stuff like rents and power bills and the things we all need to spend. And that just underscores, doesn't it, how difficult the cost of living crisis is for those people who are struggling to keep up.
Yeah, well, that's right. You can't escape it. And it also reinforces that this is a domestic problem. This is a problem that the RBA's got to deal with and that more generally our government's got to deal with. That's not to be blamed on international developments. And you can see it in the retail sales numbers that come out today, which were soft. Consumers are still under the pump and the discretionary spend is weak. Household goods retailing is falling again, even though we've got population growth and we've got jobs growth. So there is this pressure on our community which is not ceasing, and it is a diabolical situation for all of us.
Well, Warren, this brings me to, I think, the money question in the lead up to the budget, and that is whether government policy is actually making this worse, whether government economic policy is working against what the RBA is trying to do. In other words, is the federal government spending too much money through overruns on things like the NDIS and through other increases in spending? And is it crucial for them in this upcoming budget to actually trim spending, to hold it back much more firmly than perhaps they might have thought a couple of months ago?
Look, I think the most generous interpretation of fiscal policy and what the government's done in the last few years is that they haven't joined the inflation fight by cutting back, but they haven't sort of materially made things worse. But that is the most generous interpretation because in everything from industrial relations right through to, as you said, allowing actual government spending to continue to grow to its highest level as a share of the economy since the 1970s, and the fact that they have still put money into the economy for cost of living support is making the RBA's job harder. Now, again, 2 months ago, it looked like we were going to get away with it. The cash rate was going to not go up any further. But we're getting signs that there's a risk that could change, that the economy is more robust and resilient than we thought. And the last thing we need right now in this budget is more government money in the economy because it does raises the possibility that the RBA might have to go again or go by more than one or two. So, look, at this stage, I would advise the government to be very disciplined and don't put a lot of money into this economy. And if the economy is weak later in the year, okay, knock yourself out. But right now, it's a precarious situation, and you don't want to put more pressure than you have to on the RBA to raise rates.
We shall see. Warren, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insights.